من قلب الرياض وبين عبق الماضي ونبض الحاضر تلتقي الثقافات في مهرجان بين ثقافتين الذي أطلقته وزارة الثقافة بين السعودية والعراق، حيث تم تسجيل هذه الحلقة على ضوء المناسبة. في هذه الأجواء الملهمة نستضيف الدكتورة موذي الرشيد، أستاذة تاريخ العلوم في العراق القديم بجامعة أكسفورد العريقة، لتأخذنا في رحلة إلى أعماق حضارة وادي الرافدين، حيث بدأ الإنسان يدون أولى صفحات المعرفة، حيث ولد التاريخ والفلسفة. ونبدأ هذه الحلقة بصوت الشاعر الكبير عبد الرزاق عبد الواحد لنستحضر من خلالها روح التاريخ ووهج الإبداع.
عندما كورت، عندما كل آياتها صورت، قيل للشمس أن تستقيم على موضع لا تغيب، وللنجم كن أنت منها قريب، ثم خط على الأرض منعطفان تبجس بينهما الماء وانحسرت آيتان بمعجزة تجريان، فالتقى الفجر بالليل والنار بالسيل، كل بأمر يساق، وأتى الصوت كوني فكان العراق.
Moudhy, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for making it to Code. We are currently at Code Studios in Riyadh. Very excited for this episode because we're going to talk about history of innovation in Mesopotamia and the region. We're going to correct a lot of information, and this is our chance of writing our own history because you are a historian and your specialty is in the history of
Science and ancient Mesopotamia.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Your book is not out yet.
Not yet, February.
And I read some of your book, and for me, I'm an enthusiast in this field. And that means I don't do it in a scientific way. When I read your book, it was the missing link in everything that I know about Mesopotamia. So thank you, because you are from this region. You not only connected the dots, but whatever bias there was about people who wrote about the history of this area was not there. So you had a genuine interest to bring the history of the region to its a close something converging to reality. I mean, nothing compares to reading a tablet, right?
Yeah, well, there's nothing really compares to holding something from 4,000 years ago.
It's like traveling in time.
It really is, yeah.
Amazing.
Really is, yeah.
So we'll start with a quote, and we'll pick it up from there. You ready?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, ever has there ever risen and brought us flood, the mayfly, Aka Kululu, am I pronouncing it right?
Perfect.
Floating on the water, on the face of the sun, its countenance gazes. Then, all of a sudden, nothing's there. Uta Napishti in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Find out who you are and do it on purpose. Dolly Parton. So, disclaimer for our audience, English is not my first language. I learned it as I go, and Moudhy, her Arabic is not perfect, so we're both...
We're muddling through it.
Exactly. Yeah, so the connection is we both from Saudi, and we both love this space, and I've been chasing her for a year, but we finally managed to do it. I'm very excited about this. It's a big honor to have somebody can read a language as old as Sumerians, which is cuneiform language.
Cuneiform, exactly.
Thank you,
yeah,
thank
exactly.
you. All right, so the idea here is we tried both to talk about another language that nobody uses today except scientists or somebody who study this language. And I'll start with just get to know you a little bit so the audience can relate. Tell us about your early time growing up. Where were you born? And just something so our audience can know something about you. Then we'll jump into more details towards the space we're here for, which is innovation in Mesopotamia.
Sounds good. Yeah. As you said, I'm from Saudi Arabia. I was born in France, though, because that's where my father was working at the time. And then we moved to Saudi when I was about 4. And I had I don't know, it's funny because I was in mentally preparing for the podcast, I thought, I'm actually more nervous to talk about my boring life than about the incredible history of Mesopotamia that I've been so lucky to get to study. But my early life was really, a sort of normal toddlerhood, I would say. I have 4 brothers that I grew up with. I have more siblings than that, but we didn't all grow up together because of the age differences. We went to the American school, which was quite unique at the time for a Saudi family to go to the American school. But my father went to university in America, and he was determined for us to sort of follow his path. So he thought that would be the starting point for that would make the most sense.
Okay.
But yeah, I think.
So growing up in Riyadh was almost from 4 to 10 or 14, right? So 10 years. So you get to
exactly.
experience Saudi life and how Riyadh was.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I know you just came recently to Riyadh. How was it? Like, what do you feel changed?
So much. So I used to come quite regularly, and then there's been a span of time where I just haven't come for the last about roughly 10 years. I came just under 10 years ago to do an archaeological dig in Jubba outside of Hail, which was incredible, and I really can't wait to go back. Keep wanting to drag my family out and just be like, we just need to go to Jubba, you need to see all the rock art. But it's changed so much, but it still feels so familiar. It's almost like there's like software I have to run when I'm not here. Like when I'm in England or any other country, I kind of have to run the local software to make sure that I'm getting the social cues right or the slang right, or just trying to fit in a not in a way that gives up any part of myself, but just in a way that makes it easier to communicate and function. But here I don't need the software. It's nice. And strangely, despite all the changes, there are lots of common denominators that are still there, that are like all the reference points that all these other things have just grown up in. So it feels, to me, it doesn't feel like a shock. It doesn't feel seamless. It feels like I'm home. It feels really good, actually.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I am really interested to hear your feedback, because how evolution of human mind became, because you read old literature. So you're one of the few people who can have this idea about how humans develop in a large scale of time and small. But since you mentioned the place Jubba, please talk more. What was the project? Just it's not, because we're excited in Saudi to hear all the discoveries and possible findings. So tell us about this experience, what was the purpose, and what are the findings?
Sure, yeah. I will just say from the beginning, there are such an incredible breadth of heritage sites in this country. It's unfathomable. Like, I never would have thought as a child, because we didn't learn about it at the time. I wish it was something that I could have started learning about as a child, because I think it might have changed the trajectory of my life. But in Jubba, I learned the ancient North Arabian languages and scripts while I was at Oxford for fun. That is, I think, all you need to know about how much of a dork I am, is that I just sat down and learned them with one of the specialists who happened to be in my college. So I ended up on this archaeological survey to be the person who read the scripts. So that if we found a panel with rock art and there was also a written inscription there, I could say, it's the name of the camel, and it's saying it's a she camel and it belongs to so and so, or it's addressed to this person. It's a love spell, whatever it might be.
What period was that?
So the rock art ranged from I think about 40. I'm not a rock art specialist, but I think it was 40,000 years ago until like the 1800s CE. So it's a humongous range, and you can see. It was explained to me by the lead excavator. Her name was Dr. Maria Guanin. She's an incredible rock art specialist. That you can see drawings of animals that you wouldn't find now because the climate has changed so much. So, for example, cows, bovids, I think was the more fancy term, which need grass. So the fact that people are drawing cows means that there were cows, which means that there was grass. And that's because the monsoon that's through Africa went just a little bit further north, enough to kind of graze Saudi Arabia and create these perennial lakes that people would cluster around and move through on their way through the desert, move past on their way through the desert. And they left behind, just like you see graffiti on a wall today, so and so was here, or the name of some band or whatever.
Humans,
we did the same thing. 4,000 years ago, we were writing our name on a rock for someone to remember that we were here. It's so
amazing,
cool. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, we will have so much to talk about in this field, but I would love to continue your journey. So now you are crossing roads from high school to college. You go to Columbia, right?
That's right.
So you did bachelor's of philosophy, I guess.
That's right.
Tell us about your journey there, challenges and opportunities. We'll move to how you wind up doing your master's, and then we'll start the journey of the cuneiform language.
Perfect. Yeah. So I went to a boarding school actually for high school in America, which is an excellent school. I have nothing bad to say about school. I was really lucky that I got to go there, but it was a culture shock to go as a 14-year-old girl from Riyadh to Lawrenceville, New Jersey, which is really a small town in New Jersey, where I other than my brother, the only Arab there that I'm pretty sure. And it was an adjustment, and it was quite a hard adjustment because in boarding school you don't have your parents with you, so you just have to kind of figure it out as you go. So I would say that affected me a lot. It affected my confidence a lot because I felt like I don't fit in here, but I have to, because I have to do well in the school because my parents went through hell to make sure I had this opportunity. And yeah, so I think that those were some really challenging years, and I took solace in something I could control, which was learning. I can control the notes I take, the preparation for my exams, the writing of the essays. That was something that I felt really comfortable in, and that I love learning and I love reading, so it wasn't like a huge sacrifice to throw myself into that.
So you were able to reframe that challenge and say, okay, this is where I am at. Some things I can't control, but what I can control is the things I can do.
Exactly.
So you were able to, at age 14, to reframe. I mean, I'm sure it took you maybe 6 months to adjust, but eventually you came over it and you were able to blend into school, right?
Yeah, I tried really hard to, and it's funny because I think all of us go through a phase. Maybe I'm speaking too broadly, but where we really want to be like everyone else, like we don't want to stand out at all.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And then something flip flops. I don't know. You turn 18 and you're like, how can I be as unique as humanly possible? And I think that's beautiful that we all kind of get to that point, and where we're figuring out what our identity is, and we're trying different hats, and we're seeing what fits our, what we value, and figuring out what that is. So I think mine just felt maybe it wasn't, but it felt really magnified because I was taken out of my home and just dropped somewhere else. Like, I had to really figure it out as I went. But I'm glad that I had the chance to do that.
I always talk to folks in almost the same subject, and this comes out as, sometimes it is challenging and it hurts, but growth needs, some work. And if it's not challenging, that means there is no growth. And I always tell young people this idea of you get to know yourself. If you're comfortable, you don't know who you are. Unless you get challenged, you travel a lot, you go to different places. And I'm sure that time was growth for you. But since this school, what is the memories of leaving school, going to Columbia? What was the decision? How has the transition worked out for you?
Yeah, so I took the saying, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket," and flipped it on its head, because the only school I applied to was Columbia. I do not recommend that anyone do that, but it was really the only school I wanted to go to. I wanted to be in New York. I loved their, and I still think it's great, their requirements that you need to fulfill to graduate, because it kind of forces you to learn math, science, a language, literature, philosophy, religious study. They force you to do this foundation.
Amazing.
Which I thought I really wanted the chance to do that, to tackle that, as well as whatever it is that you end up specializing in.
Amazing.
Yeah, so Columbia was great. I learned a lot there. I really struggled, though, because there was so much. For the exact same reason I wanted to go there, I struggled to get through the degree.
Because there was a lot of reading.
It was just so much reading. Yeah, there were weeks where it was like over 1,000 pages of reading, and I'm not like a fast reader. So a lot of people meet me and they're like, "Oh, you must read so fast. You must be so." I'm like, no, I'm slow. I'm a slow learner. I have to work really, really hard to remember stuff. I have to organize information in a really specific way for it to stick, for it to have any chance to stick. So I struggled a lot, but I enjoyed the struggle, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't a challenge that I didn't love, but I did have to work hard, and my timing, I would say, wasn't the best, because I got there right after 9/11.
Oh.
Yeah, so there was a lot of anti-Arab, particularly anti-Saudi
And you
sentiment.
felt that,
Oh yes, like I'd come
especially
home.
as a Saudi too.
I'd come home. This was back before people were texting each other on phones. So you had whiteboards on your door, and people would leave notes like, "Oh, stop by to find you." And I'd come back, and it would say like "kill Arabs," and I'd get prank calls with like threats. It was
so
awful.
sorry.
But then I also didn't feel like, should I report this, or is this going to just draw attention to myself and then maybe affect how I get through this degree? And you know what I mean? Because it
Yeah.
wasn't like I felt, oh, they'll definitely be on my side on this one. So it was challenging for that reason too. But I found a really great group of friends, and I had some incredible teachers, many of whom were influenced by Edward Said. The late Peter Aoun was incredible. They were just so supportive, and they made you feel like there was a space to be you safely.
Amazing.
And at a time when it was not the whole place wasn't that space.
Sometimes looking back at things, maybe or living through them, it's like, why me? Why at high school this happens? Why at undergrad this challenge? But if you look back at events, they were preparing you to something bigger,
Yeah.
bigger challenge, whatever that is. But I'd love to know more about Peter Aoun.
Aoun, he taught classes on Islam and the history of Islam. I think I took most of his classes. By the end of it, he was probably sick of my face. But he was notorious for his incredible ties. Like, he had the best colorful, striking ties. And he would walk and this was before we had PowerPoint presentations, when it was just all you did was stare at the PowerPoint. He would pace back and forth on the stage with these incredible ties, and it was just so clear how he explained, our history and heritage and religion, and I just felt like I really connected with him, and he really built my confidence up, because I think by the time I got to like my third or last year at Columbia, I was just so broken by so many different things, but he really kind of, when I did well, he went out of his way to say that was excellent, and nothing really lands like that when you really need it, to hear it from a professor you respect and admire. It just, I remember the last blue book I picked up. So we used to do our exams in these blue books.
I almost forgot about these.
I know, sorry, to bring it back up.
I'm like, what blue books she's talking about?
I remember I went to pick it up, and my grades hadn't been released yet, and I was, waiting to hear how I'd have done my last term, and didn't know what I was going to do next, so I was very stressed out. And I opened the blue book, and I saw that it was an A+, which I don't even know how he assigned an A+ for a humanities paper. And I just sat on the top of the steps outside of his office, and I cried. I was just so happy and so relieved. So he was really I would say, I'm so grateful I got to learn everything I did at that school, but there were some teachers that did an incredible job of lifting you up, and he was absolutely one of them.
Amazing. And this is for all the people who are hearing us, whether they're doing bachelor's, master's, PhD. Cherish the moments with your professors, because you're going to look back at them later on.
Yeah.
And what it's going to remain is those relationships we develop, the respect we have for our professors, for our colleagues, and the memories. It's going to be maybe a topic for a podcast you'll do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So now we are at Columbia. And before I leave Columbia, is there anything you want to talk about in Columbia? Events, challenges, or we should move to what came after Columbia?
Yeah, I think the thing that was the scariest part was when you're in your last year at Columbia and everyone seems to know what they want to do. They're like going to work at a hedge fund, or they're going to law school, or they're like incredible artists who are just, taking the leap to do something they love. And I was like, I have no idea what I want to do, not a clue, Yeah. So I thought maybe I'll apply to law school, because it seems to be a useful degree, and definitely my parents were like, yeah, go to law school. We want a lawyer in the family. We don't have to pay legal fees anymore.
There's no lawyer in the family yet.
Not yet, so far. And so that's what I thought I would do. And I studied for the LSAT, but I can't take an exam to save my life. When I tell people how I did on the SATs to get into university, they're floored. They're like, how the heck did you get into Columbia with an SAT score that bad? So I think the challenge really at the end was, what do I do? And I was very much untethered and, a ship lost at sea, just trying to find any direction to go in. But exciting. Looking back, I think it's an exciting
I'm
thing.
glad that
to
happened
go
because
through, yeah.
we are lucky today to have here on the show talking about your book later on. But okay, so that happens, and next you are in like a layover in London.
Oh, that's right.
Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I had just got my LSAT results back, and they were a disaster. Like, I couldn't apply to any law schools with those scores. And my brother and I, he was in school, I think he was in California at the time. We were going back to the Middle East, so we stopped in London. And instead of doing a miserable 7-hour layover with like 200 security checks, you know the drill, we decided to stay for a week and just enjoy London on the way back home. And I think he was probably doing normal college kid things, and I signed up for a class on books in the ancient world. And the first day was on cuneiform tablets, and the guy that taught it, his name was Irving Finkel. He was a curator, I don't know if he still is, at the British Museum. And he took us into the museum before it opened. So this like humongous empty museum, which is already like a cool thing to get to do. But then he took us to I think it was room 55, where the tablets of the library of Ashurbanipal were, who was the last great Neo-Assyrian king, and the empire he ruled over was the largest in the world up to that point. And he was pointing out these tablets, including the Gilgamesh tablet. There was a star map, which showed what the sky looked like on a particular night in like January 100-something, or 600-something BCE. And I just thought, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, it's dead languages, it's Semitic languages, because as much as my Arabic is not good enough to do this podcast in Arabic, I think there's such an elegance to Arabic and languages that are structured around the root-based system. And the insights you can get into people's lives, because there are just so many sources. And he took us to the back room, which was lined with shelves, 140,000 tablets and fragments, he said there were.
140,000.
I think that's the right number, but it's a number that makes you think gets crazy. That's not possible. How do you even count that? And I thought, okay, I think this is what I want to do. I don't need that good LSAT score. I give up.
Tell us the feeling, like what did you feel emotionally, physically, first time you touched one, and then when you left that room, in terms of, okay, this is something I love, I can suffer doing PhD for.
Yeah. I think, well, I don't think I got to handle anything during that course. But that day I went online and I was like, where can I apply to do this? Without any background, by the way. Yeah, zero. Amazing. I mean, philosophy degree is not exactly.
You knew this is it.
Yeah. And so I spent a couple hours looking, and the only place that was still taking applications, because it was like July or June or something like that, was Oxford. And it was also a 2-year degree where you didn't need any background knowledge. They were going to teach you everything you need to know in 2 years in order to carry out further academic study. And I thought, I'll just roll the dice.
Think about the stars aligning, right?
Yeah. So the first tablet I got to hold was in Oxford. It was at the Ashmolean Museum during one of the classes there. And that is an experience that, I don't know, maybe some people who work with tablets regularly, because the primary focus of their research is to translate a particular corpus and bring that to light, which is hugely, I mean, there are days where I wish I could do just that, because it's just so magic to translate something for the first time. But it doesn't get old, that feeling that you're holding something from 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. It's like you're holding hands with somebody who also held that tablet. You're connecting. It closes the distance instantly. And there's just something, I mean, I think we all feel that to some degree when we are in a heritage site or at a museum looking at something ancient, whether it's from our culture or someone else's culture. There's just this instant, wow, like this survived, and someone made this, and I'm kind of connecting with that person from where I am right now with all their experiences that went into whatever it is that led to that moment, and then all my experiences that have led to this moment. There's like a convergence that's so beautiful. So I think that's really what I took with me when I left the room. I never quite articulated it. It just felt like an overwhelm, but one that I'm just so grateful I get to experience, and you feel it here, when I was in Jubba, we thought we would find 100 rock art panels, and we found that many in the first morning, and every panel that we saw was just more amazing than the next, thinking, wow, this is all our history and it's right here. So
there's so much still to uncover.
I know.
And I know nobody gets more excited like an archaeologist. And we go, oh, what could I find next?
Yeah.
But in your book, you talk wonderfully about why these things has been preserved for this long.
Mm-hmm.
What even civilization who came after thought of their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
They documented this like they were keeping stuff in a museum.
Mm-hmm.
Why languages started the way they are. I mean, I'm racing my thoughts to talk about this, but I know we have to go with the flow. We have a few more left. What happens after Aswan Museum? You do your bachelor's. What's next?
So I started it was an MPhil in cuneiform studies at Oxford. That was a 2-year degree, which was again, there was a lot to pack in, and they design the course really incredibly, because you learn Akkadian in the first year, which I have to say I relied a lot on the Arabic to not have to do so many vocab flashcards, because there's a lot of overlap in the languages, in the Semitic languages. So, and then they do Sumerian in the next year, and by the end of it, you can read fluently all these languages that cuneiform was used to write, as well as you've written a thesis on a topic that you found interesting. So I did my master's. I stayed for a doctorate, just barely.
Before the doctorate. Yeah. So in master's, you did Akkadian and Sumerian.
Sumerian. Yeah.
What about Ashurian?
So Assyrian, the ancient Assyrian, because there's modern Assyrian, which the people are descending from the ancient Assyrians, but the language itself is a different Semitic language, related, but not the same, not the same thing.
So let's dig deeper here. So Akkadian is the first Semitic language.
Yes.
And I have a friend from Iraq. I used to volunteer in a church helping immigrants. And his family was one of them. So they invited me to their home, and they were talking Assyrian. Yeah. And for me, I was like, dude, this is like 30% Arabic. Yeah. Like, I can understand. Yeah. So what is the difference between a new Assyrian or old Assyrian language?
It's really more a question of the syntax and the specific vocabulary used, but the kind of the tenets of the grammar, there's a lot of overlap.
Oh, so they understand each other?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but maybe.
Maybe, okay.
So modern Assyrian, I think, and I'm not a specialist, so I apologize to anyone listening to this thinking this woman has no idea what she's talking about. I think is a dialect of Aramaic. And ancient Assyrian is a dialect of Akkadian. And Akkadian is like the grand uncle of Aramaic and Arabic. Yeah. It's an East Semitic language, and these are all West Semitic languages. There's minor variations in grammar. Got it. It's a classification thing. Like, if I were to read a text to you in Akkadian, you'd probably recognize, just like you felt around the people speaking modern Assyrian, that you can recognize a lot of the words, or at least the grammatical elements. That sounds like it's the subject of the sentence, or that sounds like a verb. That sort of thing.
So the nerds out there, don't quote you or me on this. Yeah. So I was walking here, and there was this lady, and I was talking about interviewing somebody who knows this language. So she showed me a tattoo. She told me this is Aramaic. I was like, cool. This is Hebrew. Okay. So in Aramaic, they used to use cuneiform letters or words. What do they call them? Letters or words?
Cuneiform characters, you can call them, because some of them are.
So this is what I read. So correct me. And we would explore the space. I know you're not expert in it. So what I knew was even Aramaic, which Hebrew and Arabic came from. I think it's the Jesus Christ language too, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, which is still spoken in Ma'lula and Syria. So my notation was Aramaic was written in cuneiform because they didn't have characters. Is that true?
So Aramaic, there are some cuneiform texts that record the Aramaic language, but they're quite unique, and they're actually really cool texts. But Aramaic, I believe, they used the same alphabet that Hebrew was used to write, but there are lots of other alphabets that Aramaic was written in, and that's, as I understand it, there are quite a few dialects of Aramaic. So Syriac, for example, is a dialect, and they have a different alphabet as well, which is, you see it in a lot of the kind of illuminated scripts. It's a stunning, beautiful script. And then there's like more kind of cursive versions that you find on incantation bowls that were buried upside down in houses to protect the inhabitants from whatever people believed in at the time. So it was there are different scripts that Aramaic was written in, but I'm not a specialist of Aramaic,
I hear you.
so I apologize to anyone listening.
Don't worry,
to
this is just an open conversation for
Yeah.
a topic that a lot of people don't know a lot about, including myself. And what I felt when I read your book, I'm like, man, I wish something existed like this before. And I am serious about this because whoever going to read your book going to understand what I'm talking about. You scale the development of humans from where they started, and a narrative that comes from tablets you were exposed to and literature that actually means something from the mouth of those people who lived there. Now we get see again. I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, it's
We'll go back to your PhD. So why did you continue to do, like, you loved it so much again? You
Loved it so much, yeah.
Okay.
And I specifically found, a topic within the field that really lit me on fire. I mean, which is a history of science, the history of people trying to make sense of stuff. So I landed on the history of medicine for my thesis, and I wrote about. It's so funny because my dad has a PhD as well. He's an engineer also, and when he asked me what my PhD was on, I said it's on 3 words in Akkadian, and I'm trying to understand what they mean. And he was like, "You wrote 100,000 words on 3 words, like ma'uli." So yeah, my PhD focused on terminology for mental distress, and I picked 3 phrases.
Which is?
So one is a shshtu, which is, I think, a description of like a depressed state, or it can also be a stupor, like when you have a really high fever and you're kind of out of it.
Okay.
And then one was khib libbi, which is breaking of the heart, which I think refers to a kind of anxiety. You can translate it as heartbreak.
Yes.
Not like my heart broke because my relationship didn't work out, but just, you can experience it like before an interview or that sort of thing. That's the kind of, when you feel in your stomach, your nerves, that's what it's referring to. And then the other one was Temushanu, which is his cognition changed, which may be a sort of reference to disruption in your faculties. So it comes out as disruption in speech. So I talked about those three terms.
I'm filled with emotions because I remembered one of your quotes that says, even in old Mesopotamia, it looks like the heart was broken. Is it that?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love it. I think this talks about humans 4,000, 6,000 years ago or today. They still have emotions. They still have their heart broken. They still have mental illness. And we are 2024, and only Corona brought about the awareness of, well, people should worry about mental illness. We'll talk about all this in a sense of historical perspective, and why Sumerian culture from that region was the beginning of what I thought philosophy was born in Greece. I read an article that says actually the first philosopher was somebody whose parents moved from Phoenician land to Greece.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
when I read your book, I learned actually it goes even beyond
further
that
back.
to Mesopotamia, which is today southern Iraq. Now, Sumerians settled there. A lot of writings that I've read was telling their language was something that was not close to anything around them.
Correct.
That doesn't mean they're aliens, but it was something they created that led them to be the first people who made so many inventions, from the wheel to pie to people thought Pythagorean theorem at 400 BC, before Common Era BCE was something from the invention, where 1800 years before that Sumerians actually mastered that. There's so much in history we're going to talk about. Before I jump into the first chapter, is there anything you want to talk about, the challenges and opportunities in your PhD? I know there's a lot of stories, but if there's something you want to talk about before moving to it.
Just that I'm so grateful that I found it that day in London, and that I got to pursue it, because it's just such a
Amazing.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege to get to study this fascinating culture.
Amazing. So I'll give introductions to the audience. I don't expect everybody to understand certain things, so I'll just give what I feel like is going to help whoever that doesn't have an idea about this kind of stuff. So BCE is before Common Era.
Exactly.
So if we talk about 600 BCE, that means 600 before the time. So today it's 2,600 years ago. Right?
Exactly 2,600 years ago.
600 years ago. If we say 1,000 BCE, it's almost 3,000 years ago.
Exactly.
And so forth.
Exactly.
So that's one. So BCE. Also, there's another reading. It's called BC before Christ, but it's an old reading, and new scientists just trying to be more scientific. So BCE and BC means the same thing. When we talk about what else? Languages. Somebody enthusiast like me who've been reading this for fun have so many confusions. So don't feel you're alone. For our listeners, if you're confused, Moudhy's book will do the job. And this is why this interview is very important, because she is gonna tell you a story about certain things and connect the dots from tablets you've read and translations she's gone through, and she experienced certain things that will fill these dots. So book is not yet. When is the book coming out?
Next February.
Next February.
Couple months, yeah.
Couple of months. I'm really excited for the book. And why the book is important, because it's filled the gap. Meaning, she's going to explain why there is a Sumerian king, then there is an Akkadian king, then there is a small Sumerian king bringing back something, an overlapping of events, why certain artifacts are from different times are in one place, why clay and mud meant something to the people who lived in that earth, what made innovation something from the wheel to agriculture, and the need of counting barley or agricultural products. Now, before we start, I've read Gilgamesh from the translation of Dr. I forget his name, Taha Bakr. And in his introduction, this is what he says. He says, Sumerians is one of the unique cultures because the tablets exist today and people can actually read their stories. If we talk about the first Old Testament that was written, it was written almost from 400 to 600 BCE. And that time, I don't remember the name of the king, but it was written in Iraq, because it was, I think, the first or second enslavement of people of Judea and Samaria. And to give reference to people, people in Mesopotamia produced tablets 3200 BCE, right? So this is 5,300 years from today. So put some anchors perspective in history. Let's start with the Obadiah. How do you pronounce it? The Obadiyyat?
The Ubaid.
Thank you, the Ubaid. So it sounds like an Arabic word.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them do, right? A lot of the cultures do. So, I mean, I think might be also helpful for those listening who aren't too familiar with this period in history, is to say that ancient Mesopotamia is a region, and it refers to what we now call Iraq, Syria, and some of the surrounding countries. So occasionally it went into Turkey or into sort of Lebanon. And even during some periods there were Babylonian kings who came into Saudi Arabia. So it's, so there's an ebb and flow in the size of what we would consider to be under ancient Mesopotamian history. And as you said exactly, in the 4th millennium BCE, so the 3000s BCE, there are some incredible developments that happen that really, I mean, without which I don't think, I mean, presumably somebody else might have invented these things, but we wouldn't be we wouldn't have books, we wouldn't have, the exact thing that I wrote, the medium that I wrote my book in wouldn't exist. So the Ubaid culture predates the Sumerians. They're known from their pottery. I don't know too much about them, but they're the people who lived in the region before the development of writing. And from the development of writing onwards, around 3400, 3350 BCE, we start to see evidence of the Sumerians. And we think, even though we can't really read those very, very early tablets with certainty, we think it must reflect the Sumerian language, just because that's the language that is very clearly reflected in the texts just a few centuries later. So it sort of makes sense to extrapolate that back.
What year is this, the first writings?
3350 to 3400 BCE. So all of these dates are a little bit wishy-washy because they're impossible to pin down perfectly. We kind of know everything in relation to everything else. But the earliest examples of writing are found in an archaeological layer of Uruk in southern Iraq that is just after That's around 3200 BC. So they must have been made before that period. So that's why it gets dated to the period that precedes that.
So dating, do you guys, I know in your book you talk about dating, so it goes to events like the star, called Nizak, right? The star thing, or and everything between it will be benchmarked to it. Carbon dating is used too, right? So what is like, do you guys go by carbon dating more? Do you go by events like this? Like how's the time calculated? Because a lot of audience say, well, how do you know it's 3400 BC or BCE?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question. So there are some astronomical events from the first millennium BCE. I think they're from the 8th century, so 700s, that anchor all the dates that follow. And so the few centuries before, because the ancient Mesopotamians, one of the people that lived in ancient Mesopotamia, one of the incredible gifts they have left behind is that they wrote their own histories down. They wrote, this king ruled for this long in this area, and this king followed him for this many years. And then they also wrote inscriptions, year 1 of the reign of King Shulgi, year 2. Wow. So they kept copious records of everything that happened.
Why?
Well, I guess they were interested in recording for posterity, but they also had a really immense sense of their own history, because if we think about the British Museum and its 140-ish thousand tablets and fragments, we have a broken record of it. But the scribes working in ancient Mesopotamia would have had access to tablets from 1,000 years ago, mostly unbroken. So they were aware that they had this long history to write about and to work on. But also there were lots of other reasons to record. So kings recorded their deeds so that they could make sure that the deities that they worshipped they were getting kind of credit for what they were doing. Like, I built this temple to you, but they have to write it down as a count. Exactly.
We get to learn so much about this little stuff through this discussion. Let's start with the development of the language. I don't want people to understand there was a transition.
Yes.
So اللغة المسمارية, which is cuneiform language, started with shapes. So a shape of a cow, I have 3 cows. So cow was the shape of the cow, then 3 lines, right?
Dots.
3 dots, right?
Exactly.
So talk to us about, Ubayd era was not recognized because there was no written language, and it was small villages. Tell us about why Sumeria is different, the birth of the language, and after that we'll move us through the development with them too.
Sure. So around the end of the 4th millennium BC, so let's say let's pick 3300 BC as an anchor for just so that I don't have to keep harping on about I don't know what exactly the date is. Okay. There was they made some incredible leaps in agricultural technology and irrigation systems that enabled them to farm so successfully that they had all this extra stuff to keep track of, all these extra transactions, all these extra products. They needed extra people to process and pick the products. So it became a bit of an administrative nightmare if you don't have something to write down, okay, this much barley came in today, this person was disbursed this much for their work. If you can't keep track of that in writing, then you have to keep track of it in your head, and then you have to rely on the 3 people that remember this. So if one of them's out of town, forget about it. You don't know who owes who what barley or beer or whatever it is that they're, products they're keeping track of.
And this was the commodity they pay people, like by food, exchange. It was exchange, right?
Like rations, exactly.
Rations,
exactly.
Or they call them rations.
Yeah, well, we call them rations because it's an easier way to kind of conceptualize it.
Got it.
So someone thought, I'm going to get a piece of clay and start recording as a mnemonic device to, sort of like, when you make a note to just remind yourself, something really casual. And very quickly, this became a standardized system for recording information. And exactly as you said, at the start of the script, when it was first born, so to speak, they traced these characters that looked like the things they reflected into clay, which is quite laborious. Like if you had to trace every single character and then put the numbers down, that takes a lot longer than if you're just pushing into clay. It's easy to write on paper, but it's quite onerous to do it on clay. So, but the earliest form of writing was traced. I think they used to call them pictograms, but they don't call them that anymore. But just because they sort of look a bit like pictures, and they represented objects in the world, and eventually this develops into features of grammar and then sound. The signs take on more sounds, but we can get to that in a minute.
There's more structure, there's more lines, and
Exactly.
so it's a continuous development. So the innovation actually didn't happen overnight.
Exactly.
So the early innovations that enabled humanity to transfer to these small cities was the letter, was science. So apparently Sumerians knew a long time ago we need to do peer-reviewed
Yes.
tablets for us to move forward. And I love your story in your book that talks about so this king, his daughter, you always reference the princess.
And Igaldanana.
Yeah, and how they
Igaldanana.
found, Woolley found this, and what he called museum, and you beautifully explained why it couldn't be a museum, but it wasn't important. The idea was explaining, that guy who counted barley, when he's done with this tablet, he just threw it away.
Exactly.
And people use these tablets or bricks from old temples to reconstruct a new temple, like I thought Zakura was this is its original form, but it was overbuilt and reconstructed. There's so much exciting things ahead of us. Moving from this Sumerian development, what are the major inventions after figuring out how to express themselves, counting the commodities? What came next?
So what came next actually sort of came at the same time, which is at the time that they were developing this new technology, really, for recording information for administrative purposes, they also decided, well, if we want people to learn this and use it, and for this to survive beyond a generation, we need to make dictionaries, essentially. So they created these lists of words that were thematically organized in order to teach scribes, how to function within this new administrative machinery.
Not everybody scribes.
Just scribes, yes, just the people who had to, because everyone else was doing other things within the farming economy or otherwise. So I think, to me, that's like an incredible innovation that you have at the end of the 4th millennium BC, at the same time that writing is born, or, as you rightly say, sort of develops, not overnight. You also get these dictionaries, which deserve, a whole podcast of their own. They're these incredible documents where people have listed, thousands of words. There's one called Urrab, which is just a reference to the first line of the text. And it lists 3,000 Sumerian nouns and like noun phrases. And the way they organize the information is like, it'll be like, okay, these are all the animals, these are all the stones, these are all the trees. So they're thematically organized, but within those segments, you'll see that they're building on a particular word. So there's one section that's like calf drinking milk, calf eating milk, calf suckling milk, young calf, old calf, black calf. You know what I mean? It's almost like, just to teach, to teach this is how you can describe. But some of these lists, and this is a very interesting point that a scholar actually at Columbia called Mark van de Mierup has written about extensively if somebody wants to read further. He writes about how some of these lists have impossible things. So there's a list of vessels, so containers, and most of these are either, a plain vessel, and then inscribed into the sign itself is something else, like oil. So you'll have the basic sign for a vessel, and then teeny tiny inside it, the sign for oil. So this is a vessel containing oil, or teeny tiny inside it, milk or beer or whatever. But then you also have vessels, and the teeny tiny sign is a pig or a donkey. And it's just, that doesn't make any sense. You can't have a vessel with a pig inside it or a vessel with a donkey. And scholars have tried to rationalize this, and I think where everyone has sort of landed is that they were actually just trying to be as thorough as possible, as complete as possible in their listing of every single possible option of combination of signs. And there was a kind of new reality that they created through this writing and in trying to think about how to organize the world. So some have argued that the birth of writing coincides with the birth of lexicography and the birth of even philosophy, which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
You know how we correlate today to that? So when you used to work in corporate world, you have 2 or 3 days productive in the day. What do you do the rest of the day? You try to add things, right? So apparently whoever paid that scribe had so much time and he had a family to feed. And you're like, you know what? Let me add it, be creative.
Just extra.
I love it.
Extra workload.
I love it. Amazing. So philosophy, I see now why philosophy actually was born in that era, because the language was born then. Maybe it was early philosophical question that all humans all over the world had, but as science, was born in Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Moving to next era, what comes in your mind after we finished what we've talked about?
Yeah.
What came to Sumerians, whether it's a development in social gatherings and whatnot?
So the following millennium, the next 1,000 years, from 3000 to 2000 BCE, so we'd call the third millennium BCE, is most of it is known. We label it as the early dynastic period, just based on features of pottery. It's not so important where the name comes from, but I think this period is fascinating for the innovations that you start to see in the archaeological record, but also in the textual records. So. You start to see monumental, you already start to see monumental architecture in the 4th millennium BC, around the time that writing is developed and cities start to really grow. People come together because of how successful farming started to be. But you start to see architecture be developed for other reasons, so not just for the temple, but palaces, which may speak to the development of a kind of parallel institution of kingship or leadership alongside the temple instead of being attached within it. Even though there was always a connection between...
So at the beginning, if I understood, they were together, but later they separated.
Possibly the
through
architecture
through the records.
Yeah, exactly. Bears out that picture. But yeah, I mean, I think again, the third millennium, you also start to see city walls being built. So maybe
for
that
the
means
first time.
For the first time. And these walls are incredible. You know, Gilgamesh, who we've already spoken about and we'll hopefully keep talking about over and over again, is credited with building the wall around Uruk, the birthplace of writing. Yeah. And that wall is something like 9 kilometers long. Can you imagine how...
9 kilometers.
And it's thick. It's not just like one layer of bricks.
Yes,
you know,
like
it's like a thick wall that's also very tall. So it was an epic undertaking. And I can't remember how many millions of bricks, like 3.5 million bricks or something like that, must have gone into building it. I mean, I don't think anyone sat there and counted it, but calculating it based on the length and the number of bricks.
That explains why they exist until today, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There are lots of bricks.
Apparently, they print. We're gonna talk it later about not only scribing, but now they moved to actually
like a printing press.
Printing press, yeah, exactly. This explains how they were able to do so much. Exactly. But going back to your point, so we have this development of cities, of social gatherings. I don't remember what was. Because I was in Baalbek in Lebanon a long time ago, and there was this German scientist who was excavating on the temple of. I always forget the name. Temple of a name of a planet, something. Jupiter.
Jupiter.
So between Jupiter and another artifacts, he was digging down, and I was asking him, "This looks different layers," and he's like, "Yeah, this is actually before Phoenicians." I'm like, "Okay, is this like a new discovery?" He's like, "No, we've discovered the same area in another, like southern Lebanon or whatever." And then I was like, "Okay, so how do you?" It was like, "There's no writings. We don't know anything about these people.
Oh, interesting.
We just know about the artifacts, right?" I'm like, "What about Phoenicians?" And he's like, "Well, Phoenicians start recording stuff using letters from cuneiform language and the beginning, and this happened, I think he was saying 200 to 500 BCE, and the idea here is almost all civilization borrow tools from each other, and we never really knew what is the role of Eastern cultures versus, you always hear about Greek history and Roman history, and talking about this starting here, and how I read even letters from Roman emperors was written in cuneiform at a certain point.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and now coming to this stage, cities have developed because humans needed to expand. Another disciplines like architecture became something prominent. You talk in your book about a certain structure they found, especially molded in a certain way. Let's talk about architecture a little bit. How these cities was developed. What was the basic stuff? They had, for God's sake, toilets. Let's talk about it.
They're very advanced. Yeah. I mean, I think the archaeology is biased toward the monumental structures, right? Not because people don't care about the residential areas, but they're harder to excavate because they're kind of smaller and clustered together, but also because people tend to be sort of more interested in the awe-inspiring, humongous buildings and what they can tell us about broader social trends. So there is definitely a bias in the modern carrying out of archaeology in the area toward these incredible structures like palaces and temples. But in the shadow of these buildings are these vast residential areas. In some cases, it's better to just leave them undisturbed, to use satellite imaging or other newer forms of technology to
drones.
Yeah, exactly, to map it and just
yeah.
leave it be, because exposed to the elements, it'll just be lost. Whereas it's just sort of better left where it is. But in some cases, areas have been excavated. So residential areas do show evidence of toilets, stuff that is maybe not so glamorous, that we don't think, well, how did they invent those? And they were constructed from bricks, and they had these pits. I don't know if I should get into too much detail because it's a bit gross, but these seepage pits that the number twos would sort of just pile in, and you'd have to clean it out every once in a while.
And the clay made the rings, like rings.
Exactly,
clay.
like rings dug deep into the bottom.
To my surprise, and today in homes where sewage is not established, they still do this.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah, they do a pit outside,
yeah,
and it just goes in the ground.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it was clearly an efficient way to get rid of stuff.
Yeah. Another random thought: Hanging Garden Babylon's was built because his wife was from northern area. There was a lot of greenery, right? And in Babylon, Babel today was a desert. So what he did. Tar used to ooze out of the ground, so he took this. You call it in your book the black material,
bitumen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they built a castle, and they put the bitumen on the top, and they put soil, and they put flowers and whatnot. And this is how when they put water doesn't seep through the castle.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And guess what? Today in Eastern Province, we use tar to seal the. So whatever technology these people used thousands of years ago, we still use today. Yeah, but we diverged, but we'll go back to your cities. So cities, there was, these architecture. So what was the big finding in architecture that explained, okay, these people have moved into architectural technology, and they start thinking about, well, this house needs to have this space, and instead of a small window, where in England, as your book states, in England, small windows because of the winter.
Cold,
What are the things that Sumerians thought of in their architecture?
Yeah, I mean, we are familiar with this here, which is that it's hot.
Yes.
And so when it's hot, you need shade. So buildings were typically built quite close to each other so that they could benefit from each other's shade. And many of the houses would have like a central courtyard, sometimes two courtyards, that the rooms were built around. And I mean, I think that they tackled climate in creative ways that I think still work today, even, without the modern innovations of AC and whatnot, but you can still rely on, a tree keeping your house cool in the summer.
My grandmother home was I mean, they don't build them anymore like this way. It was my grandmother from my mom's side or my dad's side. Their homes were like this. There was this like balcony, and there was like windows on the top.
Yeah.
And this windows on the top, it's like a dome. And what you have to do is you open these windows so the air goes inside the house and vent the whole home.
Yeah.
And I think this architecture was built even in hotter places. Now, talking about this brings me to, let's talk about progression in this in terms of historical perspective. What came after? Okay, developing new cities, they're growing, there's more of agriculture and more people moving to the cities. What came after? Whether it's invention, pie, wheel. I'll let you do this until we move to the next era.
Sure. So I think, it's hard to chart it as a kind of straight up evolution, but there are some moments that I think are really interesting to draw out of the bigger picture. So going back to walls, for example, why bother to build a 9-kilometer wall? Well, you probably want to protect yourself, So you start to see the beginnings of intercity warfare or conflict. And in fact, the earliest known recorded border conflict comes from the early dynastic period, the 3rd millennium BCE, between two neighboring cities of Umma and Lagash. And they were fighting over a fertile piece of land called the Gu-Edina. And it's a kind of generational conflict. I mean, there were different kings who are recording that they're fighting with each other still over this piece of land. And ultimately, I think Lagash is the winner. But what's interesting is they talk about this conflict. So we have, I mean, not just the first of the good things, but some of the first of the not so good things, which is when you cluster too many, lots of people together, there may be conflicts that arise. But interestingly, from that same document, we can draw yet another first, which is that the records of these conflicts talk about how the enemy, each of them talks about each other in the exact same terms, but the enemy fled without burying their dead. And as a point of honor, that's like considered very dishonorable. So the victorious king writes about how he went to all this effort to reinter, to bury his enemy dead, because that's how, and their descriptions of corpses piled so high they reach the heaven. So when we read these texts, we think of some kind of memorial, and there are another first that we see in this period are possible war memorials. In some cases, they are not memorialized in a particularly nice way. They just get reinterred, like described in this text, where it's just a kind of mass grave of possibly the enemy troops. But in one case, in a site called Talbanat in Syria, there was a conical vertical cemetery that was built over several, not in one go. And they found evidence of reburial of what they think might be war dead. So they think this might be the first known war memorial. And I write about this in the book because I think it's just so moving that society thought to memorialize their soldiers in this way. The demography of the dead doesn't match up to who you would expect to die, for example, in a major epidemic or something like that, the vulnerable. It's like young, healthy adults buried with their equids, with their a kind of donkey called a kungu. It's not exactly a donkey, but that was quite common in that region at the time. So they're buried alongside their animals that they went to war with, possibly. So I think there's some really moving firsts that you also find in this long third millennium BCE that sets the stage for later.
When we talk about, talking about philosophy, and when you think about a king thinking about ethical philosophy of burying your opponents even though they were your enemies, that is definitely philosophy to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, moving from the memorial, what comes to mind?
Yeah, so I think, too many things. My brain is freezing. But I think we could, if you wanted, move to, because I think the real fun stuff.
Yeah, move to me. I'm leaving this space for you. You're the expert, not me. I'm just trying to move things forward. Yeah. So what do you think should we talk about next? The era or a king, and based on your expertise, take us with you.
Let's talk about, if we think about conflict and people living together and trying to make it work, let's talk about law. Let's talk about legal innovations, because I think those are also incredible.
Yes.
From ancient Mesopotamia. There are law collections from the third millennium BC, the very end of it, around 2100 BCE. But the first complete, sort of almost unbroken collection of laws is the laws of Hammurabi. And that's from around 1750 BCE. So we're now moving into the next millennium, 2000 to 1000 BCE, the second millennium BCE. And I think that's for so many reasons, that's an incredible document. I'm using the word document. This is a humongous stone stele that's like, 6 feet, more than 6 feet tall, where these laws are chiseled, and there's an image of Hammurabi receiving the laws from the god of justice, Shamash, at the top. So, but it was also copied on clay tablets.
Shamash as in Shams? Or?
Shams, exactly. He was the god of the sun and of justice. And some suggest that maybe because he's the god of the sun, he can see everything, and so he's well suited to administer justice in that sense. Yeah. So, Hammurabi is actually a misunderstanding of his name. There are newer studies suggest that, and I'm only bringing this up because the word Ammu is in here.
I'm listening.
He's actually an Amorite king. So Amorites were tribes that were around in the region for ages and ages. It's more like a social phenomenon than a particular ethnic group. I think that's a really hard term to throw into the past anyway. But his name was probably Ammu Rapi, which means something like the great dead ancestor is my kinsman. So I'm related to someone great that came before me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
Hammurabi.
Yeah, Rabbi with a P.
Rabbi, like God. Rabbi.
Well, not like Rabbi. Rabbi means, I think it means a great ancestor.
Okay.
Yeah, and
okay.
Ammu is my kinsman, a senior kinsman, and
Which
yeah.
is just
That's
an Arabic
exactly
today,
right. Yeah, it's the
yeah.
same. So under his rule, during his rule, scribes composed this incredibly long legal document that lists legal provisions. So if such and such happens, then the punishment is this, or the fine is this, or this is what should happen. But it's very much a product of schools and scribal learning, because it's basically scribes showing off. I'm being a bit reductionist, but showing off about all the legal stuff they learned at school, and they learned it so well they were able to create this document. And it covers a range of legal scenarios, but we don't know to what degree it was applied or ignored or even, well known at the time. There is a section at the end that says, let the wronged man, so somebody who feels that a crime has been committed, come and stand before my stele and find the law that applies to them. But the contemporary legal documents, like the boring stuff that you read on clay about this particular lawsuit or whatever transaction, don't bear out that these laws were applied. So it's a tricky document to try to understand.
This is what I love about this space. I mean, we think of a distance between 2 points as a straight line, and I love how your book just lays out, like what you just mentioned about I always forget their name, which you said is not the ethnicity.
Our Amorites?
Thank you.
Amorites, yeah.
I've read so many groups and names, I'm lost, but you anchor it about, just think of it as a natural progression of people who try to figure it out, just like us today.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
But let's talk about
Muddling through,
education. School. What was the first mention of there was I know you talk about this kid talks to his mom and says, my dad doesn't buy me this kind of clothes, and my friend in school, his dad buy him, and I feel like I'm looked down to, and she comforts him. It is mesmerizing to me that we do this today as kids too. But when did education start? When kids are like the records, at least.
So they must have been teaching each other how to write since the inception of writing, because they have all these, pedagogic documents like the dictionaries and the word lists that we were talking about. But really, we have a very and there's a lot of examples of school texts from the 3rd millennium BC as well. I'm not very familiar with them, but I know that they've been well studied. Around the time of Hammurabi, actually, that there is a really, really fleshed out evidence for how people learned. And we just by luck, we have so many school tablets from this era that tell us from the very first start of education, like practicing one wedge over and over again, like huge and shaky, and there are fingerprints all over because they still don't know how to hold the tablet, all the way up to, very refined, like Sumerian literature, literary works of literature, proverbs, and everything in between, including some incredible mathematical texts that we find from around this period that are really, they learned math in school so that they could carry out calculations. It wasn't like so they could do a PhD in math. And
so whoever doesn't like math today in school, Sumerians can teach you a thing or two.
Exactly.
So let's talk about calculating routes. So you mentioned Jupiter something.
Yeah.
How? Why?
I know, it's crazy.
So let's. You know what? I don't. There's so many diversions.
Yeah.
I will leave it to you. I want to talk about this subject, but let's go to where you left off.
Yeah.
Do your thing.
Yeah. Well, I think the early 2nd millennium BC, around the time of Hammurabi, you really get insight into education, and you have some really incredible moments in the history of math, like you were mentioned earlier, the Pythagorean triples. So basically a list of the numbers that you plug into the Pythagorean theorem to get the result that you need.
So Pythagorean, supposedly he created Pythagorean theorem 300 BCE.
Exactly.
Where Sumerians 1800 BCE mastered the science.
Yeah, but by then it's the Babylonians, but exactly right.
Babylonians.
It's 1500 years before. Wow. So nowhere in cuneiform so far have we seen someone write a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But the numbers, they must have been aware of that because the numbers add up to that when you plug them in. They
had to, because the calculations of the line of how a star or a sun or a planet moves, you need to be aware of mathematical calculations, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Much later,
okay.
Yeah.
So we're at this era. What other thing that you think we should talk about in progression to more advancement? And
Yeah.
please mention name of kings and
Yeah.
whatever words that I think it adds more life to our audience.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, if we fast forward a bit to the Kassites, so the Kassites take over around around 1500 BCE. We'll just use rough dates mainly
Yes.
because I'm really bad at remembering
No,
exact dates.
our audience, all the dates here, just because we want the flow of this to be. You can read more her book.
Easy to follow, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And under the Kassites, near the sort of end of their rule, you start to have scholars writing stuff down in a kind of standardized way that gets copied for the rest of cuneiform culture, which is actually quite remarkable because it's like another 1,000 years.
What does that mean?
So that means that, let's say, you take a work of literature like the Epic of Gilgamesh, although that comes from a little bit earlier. It got copied and recopied by scribes in the exact same form, more or less word for word, and in the same order for centuries and centuries and
mature
centuries.
language.
Yes, exactly, and a mature kind of scholarly corpus. Like a library. You start to have like a university library type of thing, where there are some works of medicine, astronomy, history, and literature that you just had to learn
We're
if you were
talking
going to be
about
a scholar.
university here.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first university was
In a way, yeah, and it's centers of scholarly learning. I guess in a way they were mini universities. It was passed down in a more specific way often when you got to that level of learning. So, I mean, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but astronomers in the first millennium BC often said, don't let the non-initiate know about this stuff, like don't tell anybody. So it was kind of, there were more secretive circles of learning.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think, under the Kassite kings, you really start to see a kind of cementing of scholarship. And also under the Kassite kings, my turn to skip around a little bit. In the late Bronze Age, so the 1300s BCE, you have this incredible diplomatic correspondence between great kings of Babylonia, Assyria, Mitanni, which is a little further north, the Hittites.
They were messaging each other.
Yeah, and the Egyptians.
And Egyptians
Oh
too.
yeah, all messaging each other, sort of like.
So what language?
They used Akkadian.
Akkadian.
They picked Akkadian, which cuneiform was used to write. The cuneiform characters was used to write to communicate with each other, which I think is remarkable. That they used. I mean, if they had used anything else, it wouldn't have survived probably because it was on clay. We know that the Egyptian king was getting letters from the Babylonian king saying, the gold you sent me is terrible. Like, it looks like silver. Send me better gold. Gold is like mud where you are. Like, why can't you just send me nice gold, nice things, basically? Or like, send me a bride. It doesn't have to be one of your daughters. It can be anyone. I'll just tell them it's one of your daughters. Like, I want to tell people that I've married an Egyptian. You know what I mean? So it's these incredibly human, but also diplomatic, early diplomacy moments that these letters just, so I mean, in a way that's an innovation, right? We have the diplomatic correspondence, as well as like strict rules about, intermarrying and gift giving and how to cement relations.
What was the rules in marriage?
So, I mean, as far as I can tell, it was not bilateral. So even if the Babylonian kings could send, like Kadashman Enlil is the name of one of the kings, for example, could send, and let me rephrase, the king of Babylonia, who was Kassite, sorry to be pedantic, sends one of his daughters to the pharaoh to get married, to cement the relations, but the pharaoh never sent his family abroad because they weren't allowed. Yeah, exactly.
But, which people still do today.
Yeah, exactly. It's not much has changed. So it was interesting. And then also the expectations of like the nice stuff that they would send each other, and how comfortable they were saying, like, actually this chair is not that nice. I want a nicer chair. Send me a nicer chair. And please don't forget to invite me to that party that you're having,
Oh my God, they sound like us.
They do.
So where we differ, and the time building more technology, I guess.
I think so, yeah.
So I'm jumping around, I know, but this question is for me. I'm interested to know how and what, because I walked in a place called Nahr al-Kalb in Lebanon, and there was this علامة إشارة. I don't remember what king was. I think who's the king? He was found by a farmer, and it turns out to be a great king.
Sargon.
And
king.
it says that the name of Sargon al-Akkadi. I passed by here, and this, you know,
amazing,
And I'm like, why they're here? And I went to Cedars of God, and apparently Assyrians or Akkadians loved the cedar wood.
Yes.
So, is there any writings or about the trade or the strip? I know in Gilgamesh there's the story. Just tell me, what is the relation between cedar and Akkadians, and why Lebanon?
Yeah. So Mesopotamia is kind of resource poor but farming rich. It's very fertile land, but they didn't have a lot of natural metals, and they didn't have like big forests like you find in Lebanon or found in Lebanon at the time. So they needed to import wood from other places. They needed to import, if they wanted, precious metals and precious stones from somewhere else. And their strength was really the clay and the farming, the agriculture. So the export, import, I'm like using the wrong word, of cedar from Lebanon was an important source of wood for them to build, roof beams and parts of their palaces, and whatever else needed to be made out of wood. Unfortunately, not much of which has survived because of the climate. But
thank you for answering that question. That would be my next question. So what is the exchange? What do they give them to get wood?
Yeah, I mean, there was tin. There was some tin that they could exchange.
What is tin?
Tin. It's a metal.
It's a metal.
Yeah, it's a metal. But they also sent textiles. There were crafts. Produce.
Crafts.
Exactly.
Amazing.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not a specialist of economic history, but there was a really rich exchange.
So there was
trade
routes.
Absolutely. I mean,
Amazing.
from very early on, there were established trade routes.
Going back to our line, so sorry, على قلبك. So we stopped at where did we stop? Let's pick up. I think it was.
Good question.
So we talked about architecture and talked about schools. Then we talked about.
The hilarious diplomatic records. So I mean, I think. One of the legacies of the Kassites is this rich scholarship, which they actually exported even to Egypt. In order for the Egyptian scribes to write these letters in cuneiform,
they have to teach them.
They had to be taught, right? So the Babylonian and Assyrian scholars would go to Egypt, and there's evidence of a little school there where they taught them, and they have all these dictionaries, not exactly the same ones from the dawn of writing, but the same ones that they used in Mesopotamia proper to teach people how to teach scribes how to read and write cuneiform. And they also had some scholarly texts, and there was a sharing of scholars as well in this period. So there was a physician called Rabba Shah Marduk being the head of the pantheon in Babylonia at the time. And he spent his life basically in the Hittite Empire, which is where Turkey is today. And there's some correspondence of the king saying, what happened to this guy? Like, is he okay? And then the king writes back and says, not only is he okay, he married one of my daughters and he has a really nice house. So you have this exchange of scholars and scholars having a really important status in these different courts, and then the transmission of knowledge along with that. So I think it's a really interesting period for that. But also for the way the texts survive into the first millennium BCE and evolve into something closer to what we might consider science, which is a bit anachronistic to kind of use those benchmarks to judge, but still to make it a bit relatable, we can say they set the stage for the hard sciences to emerge in the first millennium BCE.
And this is where astronomy came about.
Yes.
So I'm guessing if an Egyptian wrote cuneiform letter, if you read it and you read an Iraqi one, they look different.
A little bit, and the sentence structure is a little bit different. So I had to teach the Amarna letters. They're called the Amarna letters because of where they were found, these diplomatic correspondence. I had to teach it one semester. I actually had to teach it 2 semesters, and the 2 most stressful semesters of my life, because not only are these letters, they have like a clause within a clause within a clause, and by the end of it, you're like, where did the sentence start? Where does it end? I don't know. And I'm supposed to teach this? Are you kidding me?
Wow.
But there are some Egyptianisms in there. Like there are some grammatical variations that you can tell, it's like somebody trying to, I don't know, speak French, and they switch the order of the words a little bit.
It's like in the Morocco today, you speak Arabic, but you have so much French in it.
Yeah.
So calligraphic, you're kind of adding your own into something you're trying to send. But I'm guessing, was there writings in Sumerians or Akkadians that they actually documented this, saying, I can't read this or something because of...
That's a good question. I'm not sure, actually.
Well, maybe one day
Yeah.
you stumble upon one tablet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Amazing. So let's talk about this era now. So do we jump into astronomy? We're not there yet.
I think we can be there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're ready to be in astronomy, which is the
mic is
really
yours.
the kind of
Yeah,
crowning.
yes, yes, yes. So this is the peak.
This is to me, because I'm a historian of science. I'm like so moved by the development of mathematical astronomy and the progression of the kind of cast of characters and the progression of events that led to it.
I like what you did there with the progression. Let's start about the first mention, or where you feel like we should talk about in astronomy.
Sure. So I think really, if we want to talk about astronomy, we need to start with the astronomical omens. An omen is just a sentence that's if such and such observation is made, then this thing will happen. So for example, if there is a lunar eclipse in September on the 15th, then the king will die, or there will be peace in the land, or whatever. So it seems to be two completely unrelated statements. One is an actual observation of an astronomical phenomenon, and two is a social phenomenon that can happen on the planet Earth that seems to not have any connection to whatever is going on, thousands of miles away in the sky, which they wouldn't have conceptualized that way. But actually, the connection between the first and second parts of those sentences is governed by a series of really systematic rules that show you that already there was a scientific thinking at play. A really simple example is there is one omen from, I think it's from the main omen textbook, let's call it, called Enuma, Anu, Enlil, which just means when Anu, the sky god, and Enlil, the head of the whole pantheon, referring to their astral manifestations. So Enuma, Anu, Enlil has 7,000 such omens. One of them is a good example. It says something like, if Jupiter is steady in the morning, Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, then there will be stability in the land. Okay. I'm getting, like, it's not verbatim, but it's roughly
So
this.
we're talking
Yeah.
about the birth of zodiacs.
Almost. We're almost at the birth of the zodiac. Yeah. Oh, yes. I know. It's so cool. So what is governing that is a conceptual analogy. The planet Jupiter is associated with the god Marduk, who is the head of the pantheon. So if the planet is appearing in a steady way, the light is clear, nothing is obscuring it, it hasn't disappeared yet behind the sun, it's, visible and steady, then of course if the king of the pantheon is steady, then there is stability in the land. So there are these conceptual analogies that can govern the connection between if A, then B. But what I think is even more interesting is that in order to generate these omens, they had to carry out observations. Now, not every single omen is based on an actual observation, but it creates a kind of observational program where you're carrying out empirical science in order to come up with these things. And you're carrying out empirical science to read the sky on a particular night, and then you refer to the textbook and say, oh, Jupiter is steady, so that means there's going to be stability in the land. So let's report to the king and say, don't worry about things. This is a good week. We don't have to worry about stuff. But if there's an eclipse, for example, then we need to notify the king. We need to perform a particular ritual to protect him. People, their entire lives, these astronomers, were dedicated to observing celestial phenomena in the sky and advising the king accordingly. So it was a really important part of royal decision making, but it wouldn't have been possible without empirical observation. So that's another element of science. So you have the systematic thinking, you have the empirical observation, and you have these observations happening for centuries, generations upon generations and upon generations.
So there was records of people can actually read from the past, figure out what value they can add. Basically, it's a peer-reviewed literature.
Kind of, yeah. And there are these letters to, for example, King Ashurbanipal, in this Assyrian king who ruled in the 600s BCE, and he was such a successful statesman and warrior.
He's a big king in the history because of the library, or
yes, that's part of the reason he's so famous, is that he kept this library, which is quite a complicated. We won't get into it, but yeah, he kept this incredible library of texts like Enuma, Anu, Enlil, like the Omen collections, like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
We will go back to it. I want you to keep your flow because I think this is important. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there are letters from the scholars, from the astronomers, to King Ashurbanipal saying, this is what we see in the sky, and this is the decision you should make accordingly. So these are very concrete things that the king was relying on in order to keep his empire together, because his empire stretched from, Turkey all the way to Iran, from north all the way to Egypt. I mean, it was an enormous empire at the time with a lot of moving parts. And you don't do that. You don't rule that by yourself. Even though he wants us to.
I could be mistaken. So, yeah. Maybe him was in Nahr al-Kalb thing, not what is the other?
Sargon. There was a king called Sargon in the Neo-Assyrian period, so they did borrow names from the ancient kings. Names. Yeah, because there was a value to something that was old. So they wanted to connect themselves to ancient history. Exactly. So there was a Neo-Assyrian Sargon.
I loved in your book you talk about the curses, where there was a curse. Maybe that's why the king with his daughter, he appointed his daughter as priest in this temple and he kept this artifact because it says on it.
Don't throw this brick away.
Don't throw this away, or it reminds me of something in our culture too, right? Yeah. Like if you don't do this, you will do this, right?
Exactly.
I remember when we were a kid. People give you messages. It was letters. Now they text you. It's like, letters like, hey, if you do not do this 7 times, it's not going to be a good whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Forward this to 14
exactly,
people.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, I remember those.
Amazing. We're the same people, man.
Yeah, we haven't changed. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go back to where we talked about astronomy and I forgot. See, I am talking to you. I have so much emotions.
Yeah.
I can't believe you go through this every time you find new findings in your studies, or you get used to it.
No, you don't get used to it. I mean, I don't get used to it. I just think everything is so cool. Like I've stumbled upon a letter. This is really out of left field and a tangent, but a couple of days ago from the Old Akkadian period. So we're talking about the period of the original Sargon that you were talking about
which
earlier.
is 2300.
Yeah, 2300 BCE, okay. Exactly. And it's someone called Babi, Babi, I don't know how to say that name, writing to someone else. I can't remember who saying, basically maybe talking about her and her husband, saying please stop fighting with each other, you know what I mean? And you have moments like that and you're like, that is so cool. Like they were helping each other with their marital problems. And they were also fighting. And then the end is send me some sesame oil also. So maybe the real purpose of the letter is because they wanted some oil, but they couldn't just start, they couldn't open with that.
Exactly. Just like we do today.
Exactly. Hope this finds you well. Please send me that thing I asked for 3 times already. And you have even the names of these people. There's an astronomer called Balassi who complains about another astronomer for confusing Mercury and Venus, and they call each other names, and then they also fall out of favor with the king. There's one physician called Urad Gula. I don't know what he did, but he obviously did something really bad because he and his dad, who was also a court scholar, had to beg the king multiple times to reinstate him, and I don't think he ever did get reinstated. And he talks in his letters about how his heart is broken and what have I done, please take me back into the court. So you have these incredibly human stories behind these incredible multi-generational innovations, as well as these milestones that you reach through those kind of generations of work. All this sets the stage, and then there are also observational texts, so astronomical texts that record things going on in the sky every single night, night by night, from Babylon, starting in the 600s BC, maybe the 6th century, late 7th, early 6th century BC.
Okay.
And these record everything going on in the sky at night, as well as stuff going on below. So the water level of the Euphrates, what the stock market is doing, essentially, the equivalent, whether a particular king was in town or not. So you get the kind of political events as well as where things are in the sky, which helps us date stuff as well.
We are at the 200, 300, 400 years BC?
We're about 500 BCE,
500
which is
BC.
like my favorite kind of year, century, because as a result of all those centuries of observations, particularly from the astronomical diaries from Babylon, which recorded the death of Alexander, but which also recorded a whole host of other events, as well as astronomical phenomena nightly, scholars generated essentially equations to calculate what the planets were doing in the sky. They created mathematical astronomy from all the data that they collected over these generations. And I think that that's like it's an incredibly exciting moment in the history of science, but it's an incredibly exciting moment in global intellectual history that people bothered to do all this, but then they also made this incredible leap from data to, to math, to an abstract modeling of the things that they were making sense of in the world around them. And around the same time, they also develop what we still use today, which is the zodiac, the zodiacal signs. They divided the ecliptic, which is the band in the sky where eclipses take place, into 12 equal sections of 30 degrees each. And that's another huge
leap in human history,
yeah,
which is 12 months in the year, right?
Exactly. It mirrors the calendar in so many ways. It's a kind of spatial representation of that way of organizing time and inhabiting the world. And this enabled astronomers to locate their observations a lot more easily and to make calculations a lot easier as well. So you have this incredible kind of moment in human history that I think, I mean, it's not just one moment, it's an accumulation of many moments that still impact how we do science today. And the Jupiter text you were talking about earlier, talking about calculating the trajectory of the movement of a planet across the sky, in this case Jupiter, there's a couple of tablets that were discovered relatively recent. Well, I don't know when they were actually dug up, but they were translated relatively recently by a scholar called Dr. Matthew Ocean-Driver. I feel like I'm probably saying his name wrong, in which case I apologize to him if he ever listens to this.
The guy in front of you has misspelled so many things. It's okay.
And these are incredible, and his analysis of it is incredible if anybody's interested in reading more about it. But he talks about how the Babylonians use a really advanced form of math that's kind of a precursor to calculus to calculate how far Jupiter moves across the sky in their vision, not actual distance.
Okay.
And they use a kind of trapezoid to model that. So they're modeling something real that they can see with a really abstract mathematical method. And this method was previously thought to date to the 13th century, I think, or 1300s, sorry, I'm really bad at dates, Europe, so CE. So this is over 1,000 years before that happened. Yeah, so there are so many incredible moments in history that come from ancient Mesopotamia.
So basically you're talking about they did simulation before.
Sorta, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and they wrote out the instructions for how to do it on these tablets, so they could teach it and other people could do it. I mean, not anyone, but the other astronomers within their tightly knit temple communities could, scholarly temple communities could carry these calculations out as well. And they're incredibly hard to read. Like, I had to teach a class on them once, and by the end of the class I was sweating. It's just like, and I was like, please, nobody ask me any follow-up questions because I only know what I've memorized and made sense of for this particular lecture.
This is amazing. It tells about the education in this field too. And it's not like better or worse, it's just different. We need to understand these things were structured on unstructured languages and symbols, and the development of them, which with a language that is dead, you need to focus on just one piece because it's not like reading Arabic, right?
Exactly.
I'm guessing the more we go towards this era, there was a standard way, but still, you need interpretation of what they thought of it. Because I always tell in discussions with my friends, even physics and math today, they are our human interpretation of a converging thought to what might be possible. So what you're reading, this is their converging thought to what could be possible at their time.
Exactly.
And this is what makes it hard.
Yeah.
So it's not like because you know what you're doing, it's not like 1 + 1, right?
Exactly.
I love it.
It's so interesting, and I think there are so many other legacies of the Babylonian astronomers. They, again, working from these many centuries of data and already calculations that had been made, if not written down, by the people that came before them. But there are so many of these legacies that make it into ancient Greek sciences. So, for example, the Saros cycle, which is a period of about 18 and a bit years, that is all the eclipses that can occur, and then that cycle repeats. So all those lunar and solar eclipses that can occur in that period, and it makes them very predictable. The lunisolar year, so the calculation of having to add a certain month at certain points to align the lunar months with the seasons. What else did the units that they used, the 360-degree circle, the minutes that they used, a lot of these are found. I mean, if you measure the content of ancient Greek text against what what you find in the cuneiform, you see there is a lot of transmission from the cuneiform, and there are even some established lines for those transmission. And what I think is important, and what I really hope will happen as more of this history enters sort of popular discourse, is that we will kind of reinstate ancient Mesopotamia to its place in the history of science, so that, you know, my daughter has this book that's a pop-up, like a lift the flap space book, and there's a page in it with the history of like how we discovered all these things, and it starts with the Greeks, and I was like, no, it doesn't. It starts with the Babylonians. It starts even with the yeah, and it's just
why did always they start with the Greek
omitted.
or Roman?
Yeah,
why?
It's omitted. I mean, I think it's a historiographical thing. I think it's because it would be really hard today to find someone in my field who disagrees that science was sort of born in this way, in this place. You know?
Mesopotamia.
Yeah, like everyone, it's like
Knows.
standard that they know that the
Wow.
Babylonians invented the zodiac and mathematical science, and that it comes from this long history, and it is science, that what they're doing is science. But, you know, 40, 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. And I think it was influenced, you know, going back to Al-Rashid, by Orientalism.
Colonial
yes, exactly.
powers, yeah.
And this association of anyone east of a particular place is inherently irrational, violent, barbaric,
Yeah.
etc. And I think that really informed how people did the history of this region. And again, we have to remember that the history and archaeology of this region is very interconnected with colonialism and, you know, and imperialism. So
Edward Said, in his book, I don't remember the title. Was it The Orientalist?
Orientalism.
He talks about this in a way that this is the
It's so
importance
clear, yeah.
of historians from the region like you, Moudhy. And I've said it many times, I'm going to say it again. Please write another book and another book,
Inshallah.
because somebody from the region could have a voice, not for the world, maybe second, but for our people here on the region to understand not only what we could possibly do, but we lack nothing in innovation and science. We actually created them.
Yeah.
Now we are leaping towards the end. I will give you the mic to smooth out towards the ending of this discussion. But before you continue, is there anything else you want to talk about before we leap out of this era towards the end of the podcast?
No, I feel like
We covered
up a lot of ground. Yeah,
Yes.
we did pretty well, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
I think connecting the dots was important.
Yeah.
We have said nothing about the book. The book says so much, and I'm looking forward to it. But before the forward, last question. So nothing to add, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I think we left on a good note there.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome, great. So the last question we usually ask our guests is, sometimes in life you learn from school, you learn from university, from a book you read, but some lessons you need to live. What would you, as an identity capital question, what would you tell your younger self, a lesson that you've learned for our audience, maybe to learn a thing or two that you wish to share?
I think, you know, people say you should be to others what you needed. And I think if I were to find myself back when I was 14, arriving to the shores of New Jersey, I would say don't try to fit in. Just be yourself. Be unapologetically yourself. Do what you think is interesting. If there's something that interests you that is a little bit out of left field, or that you think doesn't fit with whatever program you're doing, do it anyway. And don't waste time. Don't waste time trying to be anything but yourself. I wish someone had said that to me when I was 14. I think I would have had a very different trajectory. I would have wasted a lot less time on
I love
things
it.
that don't matter.
Yeah, if it's not a win, it's a lesson, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Moudhy, Moudhy, and your pronounced last name Al-Rashid.
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 Yeah,
All right.
Exactly.
In our Eastern province, we say Rashid, but we say Rashid. Right?
Yeah. There's also a Rashid. And
Yeah. All right, Moudhy, it was an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you. Likewise.
I am really excited for the book coming officially. Let's show our audience that. Can they pre-order for now?
You should be able to pre-order on Amazon and Waterstone, a couple of other websites, in the UK at least.
And the book is called Between Two Rivers.
Between Two Rivers, Ancient Mesopotamia and the Birth of History. So I hope if anyone does read it, I hope you enjoy it.
It is really awesome. I'm trying to
Thank
connect to
you.
the internet so I can show them what's just on. Right. So the book is right here. All right, coming up. It's in my list. although I've read the book, which is an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for taking the time to read it. I know you're
This is
busy.
not an ad, or this book is absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. I worked
Right.
so hard on it.
That's just part of it. Like I don't remember Brad Feld, which is a VC guy in the U.S., very famous. He says, after writing one or two books, I will tell every author, and I'll give them 5 stars on Amazon because it's hard.
It's so hard, yeah.
But writing a book about this area and the names you mentioned, the connections you make, I tell you, I know it was hard for you.
Thank you.
But I want to tell you, it means a lot, not for me, but everybody in this region, because it's a treasure. And the
you.
book is right here. All right. Between Two Rivers by, this is it.
That's it, yeah. It's
Between
crazy.
Two Rivers by Moudhy Al-Rashid. All right, Moudhy, from Code here in the heart of Riyadh, the innovation hub in the region. Thank you so much. For our audience, this is Ahmed Al-Tammar from Identity Capital. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Yeah.